One of the other pieces of this that we're seeing other companies do. So Twitter, for example, now is doing this thing where, like, if you're going to send some, crazy tweet that they detect, whether it's through language or kind of intention, they will basically put an interstitial that says, hey, are you sure you want to send this? Like, basically be nice to people. And it just, again, you can click through and send it, but it just makes people stop and think for a second. I almost wonder if Apple could get to the place where it doesn't have to like proactively tell me what to put on my calendar, but if it knows that I'm about to schedule the 9th meeting for the day and there's no workout planned on the calendar, it says like, are you sure you want to schedule this on days where you don't work out and you have, more than X number of hours or meetings, then you feel like shit and don't sleep well, maybe you want to switch this meeting out for a workout. Like that type of, again, it's somewhat predictive, but also somewhat like the experience, the user experience. That feels like that is a inflection point on the individual's life. It may not create, billions of dollars of market cap for Apple in the short term, but it just feels like that would change my relationship with Apple and further deepen it, because I just can't get that anywhere else.
Yeah, and this goes into like another broader thing that I've been thinking about. But like when you start going into these softer things, like should you work or should you relax? Should you see your family? Should you go to sleep? Should you work out? There is like the health component of that, but there's also like a value system component of like, what should Apple be telling you to do? What should Twitter be telling you to say? And I think this is where you get into this is partially where my thinking had gone after the Apple stuff, but like, what happens when you start having these companies that look like countries in terms of you're choosing to be a part of them for your lifetime, and how if you're opting into their value system and Apple chooses to prefer that you should be spending more time with family than working, that's a value system choice more than anything else. And I think we start ending up in a really, really interesting and weird place. I forget who wrote the piece, but someone came out with something. I think it was in Foreign Policy Review about it was really focused on Zoom, but the idea that when you have companies that operate internationally and across, especially like China and the US, they're essentially one company that has to deal with two value systems. And that expression of the two value systems is oftentimes in massive conflict. I don't know where it goes, but like Apple's going to have to, if they're going to play this game, they're going to have to choose and codify their value system. They're essentially going to have a constitution for what it means to be a citizen of Apple. Is a citizen of Apple someone who only maximizes GDP? Are they purely like a Protestant type person? Is it someone that is purely focused like a Sweden on happiness or something like that? These are more value choices. And that's where you see like, oh my gosh, like these companies I guess we'll stick with Apple, but like Apple, I think did $260 billion in revenue. I'm pretty sure if you look at like the OECD countries, the only ones like above, I think Sweden is just on the barrier, honestly, of like, they did $260 billion in tax revenue last year. And like that is the scale at which Apple is operating. And so you're just starting to like blur the line of what is possible, what goods should they be providing, what value should they be pushing, and which of these are you going to opt into as an individual, because it really is a lifetime decision.
What is your biggest, what seems like the least obvious thing that Apple will do, but you believe they will in the next 10 years? But like, what's that one thing where you're like, people aren't thinking about this enough, but you think it's a foregone conclusion?
I think it's a foregone conclusion. I mean, man, I guess like, I mean, it's honestly the health thing. I think it's a foregone conclusion that your primary care provider will be Apple at some point in the future. I think like pre-COVID, there was a big narrative that I think people have forgotten about, where Apple was moving their stores from stores to town squares. Like they were literally calling that. Like if this is like Apple's colonialism of like the US. Like every city is going to have like an Apple town square. And if you're telling me, what do you put in a town square? You have a store for buying the things. You also have a place for getting the health things, and you have a place for educating yourself. Like this was their whole narrative, I think, a year ago. And their like big announcements was like, we are manifesting Google in the physical world beyond just a transactional place. We're a place where you get educated. We're a place where you get the things you need. And if I think about the stuff that government provides in a system like that or a country, it's education, healthcare, and then protection. And I think they are clearly doing education and providing the products. I think healthcare is next. And the question is like, do they actually get into the game of violence? Like, do you protect these values that you created? That's the ultimate government move.